I would like to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Lauren Huffmaster, and her subject is legacy. The legacy of family, the legacy of our cancer stories, the legacy of relationships with other patients and survivors, the legacy of changing the metastatic disease conversation. Lauren Huffmaster is a 2018 honoree and has been living with cancer for 8 years. She is the founder of Adventure Therapy Foundation, the host of the Adventures with Scars podcast, and the author of a book coming out this fall called Cancering: Exploring the Seasons of Emotional Healing. Lauren innovatively acknowledges and addresses the emotional side effects of cancer. She disrupts mindsets around the cancer experience and transforms expectations for a cancering life. I also want to introduce you to Lauren's daughter, Alyssa Huffmaster. Where are you, Alyssa? You're supposed to be up here, sitting in this chair. That's okay. We can make mistakes. We're human. Alyssa is a 14-year-old high school student in California, has been her mom's #1 fan since Lauren was diagnosed in 2015. Alyssa works hard to take care of her family and is excited to use her voice to share her story. She wants to show you that there is still hope, even when it seems all options are gone. Lauren, please welcome Lauren to our stage.
I am so glad to see all of you. There's a lot of familiar faces and not a lot of new faces, which means you brought friends, so I'm excited about that. I am so happy to be here with you today. I just want to acknowledge everyone because this is an important day, and we all chose to be here, and we could have been anywhere. I think there's a lot of busy things happening this week, but I want to first acknowledge Sandra and Stephen for their vision and their dedication to this process. This doesn't just happen, and they have dedicated so many hours and so much passion into this work, and so thank you for that. I want to acknowledge all the women and families and husbands and even children who are here today. This is not easy. And as Sandra mentioned, when we stand up here, we are giving you a piece of our life. We're standing and talking about the hardest moments we've ever experienced. It's not easy. It's not something we're comfortable with. It's not something most people do. I don't think people get on stages and talk about the day they fell on the floor and cried, but that's exactly what we're going to do. And so these are deeply important stories to us, and we are giving them to you as a gift. It's not easy. I just say that again, all of us. So I want to acknowledge the courageous people who are going to stand on this stage today and all the people who supported them and got them to this place. And I definitely want to thank our sponsors. We can dream and we can have great stories, but if you don't support us, we can't come here together. So thank you for your sponsorship, for believing in us, for giving us a chance, honestly, just the opportunity to begin. And that is a wonderful place. I do believe that at the end of the day, you'll be so thankful that you trusted us with your funds and your support. But I want to thank you so much for being here. Every year we have a little different theme, right? This year, our idea is that we want you to experience cancer. And we have broken down the cancer experience into different milestone moments. Each of these moments are things every person impacted by cancer walks through. The questions, the fear, the uncertainty, the moment of diagnosis, all the way into the end of life and beyond. And so each speaker will get up here and have a different theme they're going to speak about. But I just want you to know that even though I will speak about one part of the cancer experience, every woman has a similar story. And as each woman comes up and they share their piece of the cancer experience, every one of us has a similar story. The cancer experience is a process that's so similar for each of us. Yes, we live in different places with different families, but we all have a diagnosis story. We all have our fear stories and our questions, and we have each of these things, and we all carry them inside. But we wanted to give each of these milestones, these big pieces, the puzzle pieces of cancer, and give them to you so that you could truly understand what we go through as we walk through the cancer experience. Since I'm the beginning, I thought I would start at my beginning, and I would tell you my diagnosis story. So my diagnosis story begins 8 years ago, and I was a young mom. I had children who were 2, 4, and 6. I had been pregnant or nursing for nearly 7 years, so changes in my body were absolutely normal. I had no second thought when I found a lump in my breast because, what wasn't going to be changing, right? And so when I first found my lump, I didn't think anything of it. I don't think I even mentioned it to my husband. I just wrote it off as another thing I was going to change through, and that one day it would just disappear and it would be fine. And so I ignored that bump, and it did shift and change, and so I thought maybe it wasn't just going to go away when I stopped breastfeeding, but it would become, so when I wanted a 4th child, I went in and had the doctor take a look at it. Now I just want you to know, many young women are diagnosed either in pregnancy or in breastfeeding phase. It's very common. So my story, again, is tied to so many other women who are diagnosed and have young children at home. I think you'll hear stories today about women who have young children and are walking through this process, this disease. So when I went to see my doctor about this lump to make sure I was still okay to have more children, he sent me to another doctor, and then that doctor sent me for tests, and immediately I was diagnosed with stage 3. And in that moment, of course, everything changed. My physical identity changed. My hair was gone then, and my body shifted, and I walked through every typical treatment in cancer. So we wanted to do the absolute extreme. We wanted to have the harshest chemos and the most radiation, because I said if it could come in the first 20, 30 years of my life, it could come again, and I don't want that to be a possibility. So we did the hardest work, and the doctor told us it would be the most difficult year of our life, but it would get better. After that, we'd be all through, and we can move forward. Well, we did that. We had chemo, radiation, 6 or 7 surgeries, and then at the end of all of that checklist that they've given us, I had a PET scan, and I was preparing for a final surgery to have my ovaries removed. I was going to do that surgery right after the holidays. And so it was the last day of school before Christmas break, and I dropped my kids off in the morning and ran and had my PET scan in the afternoon. And then I came home, and we were going to have all of the 2nd grade class over to our house for Polar Express and pajamas and cookies and hot chocolate, and it was going to be the best. And I picked my kids up from school, and it was the beginning of Christmas bliss. I don't know if you can remember being a child. The school is out, the weather is wonderful, the lights are shining, and I picked the kids up, and we were making cookies and turning on every bit of Christmas flair we could for the kids who were coming over. And I will never forget, I was in my kitchen, and I reached into the oven and I pulled out a tray of cookies. And I had a tray of cookies in my hand, and my phone rang. And I reached up and put my phone like a good mom does. Phone here, cookies here, you're doing all the things. And it was my oncologist. And she said, "I'm sorry." And she stopped. And then she said it again, "I'm sorry." And then she stopped. And I set the cookies down, and I sat down on the stool, and I sat there waiting for something more. And all she could say was, "I'm sorry." She said, "You're so young. It's Christmas. We're not supposed to do this at Christmas, but I'm so sorry." In that moment, I ran up to my bedroom. My husband was working night shift, so the room was absolutely pitch black, quite a contrast from the sparkling lights below, and I fell to the floor, and I wept. And I cried, and I bawled, and I used all the words that could describe crying, and I laid on the floor, and I wept. And the darkness came into me. I don't know how long I stayed in that room crying. I remember at one point my neighbor came and said she was going to take my kids next door. The kids from the second grade never showed up, so somewhere along the way they got the news. But all I remember is staying in that darkness and weeping. It felt very fitting because as far as I knew in that moment, my life had just ended. I had done everything. I had done every treatment to the greatest extent. And if all of that didn't work, what future was there for me? How could I even imagine something more? And when I got up from that place and I continued day after day, moving through the holidays into the following weeks, for about the next 10 weeks, all I did was try to die better. That's all I can imagine. The only thing in my mind was metastatic breast cancer equals death. Treatments are not going to work for you. We just tried that. What else do we have? And so for 10 weeks, I got up, I took my kids to school with a smile on my face, and I came home and tried to die better. Cleaned my closets, decluttered the house. I separated my stuff into 3 piles so that each kid would have what they would want. I took my jewelry to a jeweler and tried to get them to make me legacy pieces of all my jewelry for 3 girls. I did everything I could think of to die better for 10 weeks. I was living in that darkness. I had no direction. I had no future that I could see. And so I just did the only thing I could think of, is try to die well. And then one day, I woke up, and I sat on the side of my bed. And I felt stuck there, like I couldn't move. And all of a sudden, I had a vision of a kid's version of a tornado, like a little swirly that gets big at the top, and at the bottom is just little teeny tiny. And at the bottom of that tornado, it was all smudged out and dark. And as I sat on the side of my bed, I felt myself at the bottom of that tornado. My life had gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, and I was at the bottom. And if I did one more turn, I was going to disappear into that darkness, that smudged out part where there's no direction any longer. And I sat there and I felt if I chose one more day to just die, well, I would never really escape this cycle. But I didn't know what else to do. And so in my mind, I tried to vision the other side of this tornado. It went up, it got bigger. It was sort of brighter at the top because the lines aren't all squished together. And I said, maybe I could do that. I knew that in this living to die, I was not the person I wanted my kids to remember. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't making any impact. They won't care if the house is a mess if I die. What was I wasting my time for? I realized that by living in this pattern, I'd already died, essentially. There was no more impact. There was no more me available. I did not want to waste my time with that. And so I thought, what else can I do? I can live in the other direction. But in order to do that, I have to have a different mindset. Instead of living in what I think is like the logical mentality that, yes, metastatic breast cancer does lead to death, I could think of anything else, any other thing. And so in that moment, I chose a new mindset. I decided to live irrationally optimistic. That means I don't need data to tell me that I'm going to have a good life. I don't need data or someone's story or anything to believe and hope, to have faith, to dream, to have a vision of anything else. I don't need permission for that. I can live in any direction I want, and I was spending an awful lot of energy just trying to die. That was not me. That's not who I wanted my kids to remember. And so in that moment, I stood up and I told myself, from this moment on, I'm going to live irrationally optimistic. Nothing changed. This data didn't change. There wasn't a miracle drug. It was a mindset shift. I had to do something different with my life. And I stood up. And before I took my very first step, my mind already went back to old habits. You're going to die. It's over. It's over. And before I took my very first step, I had to declare to myself, no, I can do something with today. I can do something with any amount of time if I just try to do something. And that's where I began. That's where I began to live. Honestly, that's where I began to step into the person I had always wanted to be. I had always wanted to have a voice, to lead a group, to have a nonprofit, to speak. And that moment, I chose to do all of those things, to become irrationally optimistic. Even if I can't see where I'm going or how to get there, I was going to step up and try every single day. And that is where my legacy began. But in that beginning, I had to help other people shift their perspectives too. When you're diagnosed with cancer, you walk down the aisles of the grocery and people look at you and say, ah, and they turn around and walk the other way. Even today, if I walk through the grocery store without anything on my head, people are staring, right? So everything about my life, even my environment, the friends, the family, the community, are still telling me, you have cancer and you're gonna die. Every look, every question. And so what I did first was, I had a friend make shirts for me that had statements on them. And the one I remember the most said, I wrote it down, if you can't live longer, live deeper. And that's where I began. I can't define how long my life will be, but I can define how deep it might go. I can define how high it will go. And that's where I began. That's where my idea of legacy, of purpose, and impact began. But again, when I started this journey, I was looking for direction, and the only words I had to guide me were metastatic breast cancer, metastatic patient, metastatic survivor. And when I think about these words, and when other people think about these words for me, what do they hear? They hear a story about a disease and a clinical outcome, or a disease and that person's relationship to a doctor. I couldn't let these words box me in and define the entirety of my life. Metastatic survivor is a clinical outcome from a disease. I don't want my whole life to be about a clinical outcome. I don't want my whole life to be about a disease at all. I wanted to have different conversations. I wanted to have a different direction. But I couldn't do that while living under these labels. Metastatic disease. Now, how are we going to have a good conversation about the life I want to live if everyone's looking at me and thinking about a terminal disease? It can't be done. And in fact, as long as I hold on to these labels, I can't dream beyond the limits of what this disease puts on me. And so I had to come up with new words to tell myself, and I started telling other people. I'm living with cancer. I'm not dying of cancer. I'm cancering, which means I'm in an active process. I'm engaging with the disease, but there's more to me than just a stagnant one word, this thing is doing something to me. Instead, I am engaging, I'm interacting, I'm in probably a partnership of some sort, because it is changing me and I am changing it. But I had to create new words to tell myself and to tell others to help me shift my mindset away from dying into living. Our conversations today are not going to be clinical. No woman showed up here today so they can tell you every treatment and talk about their time in the hospitals and every time they've been poked by a needle. We showed up because we want you to hear about our passions, our families, our grief and disappointment, and our hope. Today is about our legacy, our living deeper despite the challenges we face in life. And in many ways, our living longer is out of our hands. So in that way, we only will want to challenge you. But our ability to live deeper, that is in our hands. We can't bring forth the medications that will provide these outcomes that give us days, weeks, months, and years. But we can live well. We can focus on legacy and impact. And we want to share our stories and our life with you today so that you can go home inspired, so that you can bring forth new medicines. You can work and inspire your colleagues to help us have extra days and extra weeks and months and years. But today we're going to talk about so much more than our treatments. We're going to talk about all the parts that hold the living. We'll let you hear some of our stories, not about being patients, but the deeper burdens we carry around our life as we live as mothers and sisters and wives. We are connected to much more than our doctors and our treatment plans. We have a whole community of relationships that we're impacting every day. We've invested in them all these years of our life, and we will continue to do so. They hold our legacy, our families, our friends. Each of the women here have invested into all other areas of their life, and they are simply cancering through them. But what does legacy mean to all of us? What inspires us? What keeps us moving? Stage for Change was established to bring light to the metastatic experience, but also it allows the women who take this stage to look deeper into their own experience, to their own stories. When we stand on this stage, our stories have purpose. We're not isolated. We're not home resting. We're not missing out. We're not hidden outside of society, wrestling in our grief. We're in the spotlight. We're open and raw and purposeful. And finding purpose in the middle of our pain is what strengthens us and allows us to continue to dig deeper into our experiences. Because of this space and these spotlights and this stage, because you come to hear us, we pause and listen to ourselves. We are reminded that our days of rest and our days of uncertainty and the hopes we carry, these are important. Our days do not look like what we expected, and so there is grief there. But despite that grief, despite our broken futures, our legacies have the opportunity to increase. And this is a new perspective for all of us, a new mindset. And it's not an easy one to embrace. But this space, this legacy moment, creates a path for those who will come behind us. As we dig deeper into our story, we are discovering what is a typical emotional response to metastatic breast cancer. And we're educating the next generation so they do not have to rediscover again and again what this feels like. This stage also allows us to recognize and acknowledge the legacy of the women who've gone before us. The women who share this stage in the past have come, and many of them have passed away. But their stories, their pictures, their spouses that have come and supported them, we carry them with us. Every time I come into this room, I remember their stories and what they said when they were on this stage. And their absence only reminds us of what is important and what remains. We are reminded how to courageously impact this world and encouraged to urgently hold on to these things and let everything else pass away. The legacy of this place also is tied to the pharmaceuticals and the oncologies. Our legacy and yours are tied together. Every day that I am here and I'm strong, I am here with my children. My children can see me and experience me and be encouraged by me. And so your legacy, the work that you do, is allowing me and is allowing the next generation already to not be broken by the experience of cancer. Your legacy is tied to mine, and everything I do in my work and my advocacy is because you've given me the chance. You've given me days, months, and years. And everything I do is already changing the next generation. So currently in this room, your legacy is tied to me and to the impact of my children and the lives that they will lead. Our legacies are combined. We're together. We're not separate from each other in these conversations, and we're not separate from each other in the impact we will have on this world. So, as we begin to recognize how connected we are, how our legacies are intertwined, how my strength is fueled by your years and decades of service and research and all that you do, that fuels me, and how my weakness can give you strength to continue to do the work you're doing. We need one another if we want to bring change to this disease. So today, receive each story, receive these gifts of our life that we want to share with you, because every one of these stories is important, and each one will make you stronger. Today, get ready to focus on the women impacted by a disease. Let's move beyond our clinical mindset and fully see the passion that is their lives, their impact, and their legacy. And finally, today, let us grow in hope. Let us grow in our expectations of what we can do together. And let's redefine the metastatic experience. Thank you.